Oh
Huzzah!
yeah.
Well, hello everyone. I'm here with Josh Hearn, former U.S. Army officer, armor officer. Josh, can you give us a background about who you are and why you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Josh Hearn, and like Paul said, I'm a former armor officer in the U.S. Army. I joined the Army in college, like right after 9/11. Right? I was always the kid that grew up playing Army, but then I had my almost join the Marines story, right? Where I did like right before my senior year in high school. My mom pulled me aside the day of signing when they were all there in their blues and was like just begging me to go to college. And I'm like, all right. And so I went and told the guy, and he got all mad about it and left. But, anyways, I went on to college and 9/11 happened. And I pretty much joined, I like to say like the next day, but it pretty much was. I went out and I made the decision the next day to join the Army. Went out and I talked to the Army recruiter. He's like, "Yeah, we're going to drop you out of college, send you off basic training, and you'll go in, get ready to go fight." I'm like, "Okay, well, that's kind of why I came to talk to you. Cool." But then I went and talked to the ROTC guy, right? And he was like, screw that guy. He didn't know what he was talking about. We'll send you to basic training in the summer, maybe even get you to like airborne school or something, and come back, give you a scholarship. You'll finish your 2 years out here in school and go in as an officer and then go be his boss. And I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good deal. So I took that deal. And I went off to Fort Knox that next summer, went straight from there to airborne school. And I wasn't even really in the Army. I was still pending my security clearance, right? And I went to like the ROTC, like LTC, right? Like basic course, right? But then I graduated top of my class there, and they sent me to airborne school. And I showed up to airborne school, and all I had was orders on me, right? And I never had it. You had to stand there every morning and like go through an inspection, and everybody's holding up their IDs, right? And I think everybody thought I was like a spook, but I was just a young kid,
Who's the Fed?
and yeah, right. Like everybody was confused. There was a couple times they were looking at me, and they're all reading this set of orders, that was usually sloppy by the end of the day, anyways. But anyways, yeah, that was that, and I went off. The reason I joined Armor, right? Like, ROTC, like most commissioning sources, train you to be like an infantry squad leader, right? And that's their like starting point for everything. And so it's all infantry, 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 ranger, everything. I was like, all right, cool. I was doing really good at all that stuff. The summer before graduating, all the ROTC cadets go to Fort Lewis and they go through it was called LDAC, I think back then. I don't know what they call it now. It's like everything else in the Army. It's always changing what we call it, right? But you had what was it, like branch day? I can't remember what it's called. Branch day, where they all have these tents set up, right? And you get to pick like X number of, your branches that you're interested in, right? So I put infantry armor were my top two, and I don't remember the other ones at this point. I think engineering was one. It
Supply.
was never artillery. Yeah, supply. I think. So, anyways, I go in the infantry one, right? And they were not very cordial men, right? There was like this lieutenant colonel and this major, and I think like, a sergeant major in there. And they were just like, if you don't want to be infantry, if it's not your top choice, get up and walk out right now. And like three guys actually got up and walked out. I'm like, what an inviting way to start this, right? And they were just rude and direct. And I'm like, all right, whatever. It's the Army, right? And a lot of people are like that. But I went into the armor tent, right? And you had like, these two captains and a major in there. They all had Stetsons on and like spurs. And they're like, they show this video, right? And it's like the classic armor video for officers. And it had like tanks jumping and like Apaches flying in and stuff blowing up, and the occasional like ceremony where somebody's riding a horse. And you're like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So it immediately went up to number one. And again, I graduated really, really high marks, in my commissioning source. And so I got my first choice of branch, which was armor, and my first duty station, which was Germany. And I went off to Schweinfurt, Germany, and I reported for duty on, I think it was Valentine's Day of 2005. Yeah, to Schweinfurt, Germany, to the 2nd Heavy Brigade Combat Team, 1st Infantry Division over there. I was with 1st Battalion, 77th Armor.
Awesome. 177. So what school did you go to and what was your major?
I went to Jacksonville State University, the Jacksonville State University, and it's not in Florida like everybody thinks. It's in Alabama. Um, I went over there and actually I majored in criminal justice. I had started out undecided, and then I decided to get like a psychology degree. And that's what I was doing and not really enjoying it when 9/11 happened. I had missed a lot of classes up to that point already. So I went to class every single day. Or excuse me, let me start that over. I went to every single class that day on 9/11 because I was fresh out of like skip days and sat there. And I just remember like two of them were psychology classes, but all we did was just watch the TV and talk about what was going on. Everybody was like wondering why they were there and if they should run from the school. I remember that.
I remember
But
that as
yeah,
well, man.
so
I was a junior in high school, and it was very interesting. It was the same experience. I was like one of the
yeah,
only kids in class. I was at a super like. I grew up in like North County, San Diego, which is kind of a bougie area. But
yeah.
I would drive in for I'd take the bus to get to school, and I was like with kids whose parents bought them Lexuses when they were 16, and I was just like I arrived on the bus, and I was just like sitting there like everybody had pulled their kids out, and I'm just there with like three other kids I rode the bus with, and we're all like, well, this sucks. Is this?
That's up by Camp Pendleton, right?
Oh yeah, it's just south of Pendleton, and I didn't.
So my sister used to live in Oceanside.
Yeah, I worked and lived right next to there. I lived in Vista. I lived in San Marcos, Carlsbad.
Yeah,
Kelly and Kelly's from Encinitas. That's where when I first planted in like '95, we touched down in Encinitas. And then we moved around a bit because North County's just, it was a cool area.
yeah,
But so you went to 177 Armor back when Germany was a duty station. Now it's a rotational thing, which is a whole debate
Schweinfurt.
right now. It's
Yeah,
Schweinfurt.
Schweinfurt. Yeah, there's nothing there anymore. They've closed that down. That place was an absolute gem. Like it was. It's a medium-sized city. I would probably, without looking at any stats off the top of my head, compare it to something like maybe Birmingham or Chattanooga or somewhere in between there, those size cities. If anybody watching this is from that specific region that I'm referencing and knows those towns. But yeah, no, it was great. Yeah, I got there. I was a geographical. Well, I would know I was an actual bachelor, right? I was a young single officer. So I had an apartment right downtown. It was like super cool. I went, just from being a college kid to that, which I thought was pretty cool. And started out. What did I start out doing over there? It took me a minute to get a platoon, right? Because they were coming back. So when I reported for duty, that unit, the Second Brigade Heavy First Infantry Division, was coming back from OIF 2. Like I was working like staff duty at the time because I was a brand new lieutenant, and the buses were rolling in that night, right? Like just every night, all week long, buses or for weeks, right? They were just rolling in as units were coming back in, and everybody was going off on their block leaves, but yeah, so you restarted that cycle, and I was in that, and I was one of the more junior lieutenants. So let's say I started out like an S3 for a little bit. It's just kind of just a little gopher lieutenant
The staff guy.
stuff.
Hey, go.
Yeah,
I need you to go grab me. We need an OIC for this range. Go on.
yeah, just little stuff like that. I think I was actually with S4. Yeah, and yeah, it was actually S4. Yeah, I was like some just S4 assistant over there and walking around, doing inventory. I was inventorying everything all the time. I was going around to all the arms rooms. I was all, we were doing barracks inventories. Yeah,
And this will come into
yeah,
play
it was
later in the
S4.
story when we, the inventories and the arms room things.
Man, yeah, good Lord. I do not miss that. Working in the Army, that would being yeah, that's a lot of work. I do not work that hard anymore.
I am super glad to hear that because you worked your
Yeah,
ass off. So you were in
we
177.
all did.
We did.
Yeah.
We absolutely did. When you were in 177, you deployed to OIF 5?
0608.
Okay. And where were y'all at there?
Yeah, so we like I said, we started that cycle, that training cycle there with them. I became a platoon leader in Bravo Company 177. We went through our mission readiness exercise and our gunnery, down in Grafenbeer, and then went off to Hohenfels where we trained to go fight in Iraq. We trained to fight in Baghdad in the snowy mountains of northern Bavaria. It was great. It was like tanks on ice, man. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. I took a camera with me. I'd bought a brand new digital camera. I have all these pictures of tanks just stuck, mired, falling through, hidden like ponds. We at one point we came down a mountain, we took turns and we all just had to spin, and so we crashed and then drive off. There was one point actually, we were doing our recon. We had just got there, and I'm serious. I think there was like 3 or 4 feet of snow. It was just nuking every single day. I mean, it was literally tanks on ice, right? And we were doing our recon, and we're up in the mountains, right, of Bavaria, and we're on this like just this tank trail up there that it fell off on one side and it came to like this sharp turn and I slid down and the tank was teetering on this cliff on ice. And I'm like, that's it. So I told
Sketch.
my loader at the time, I'm like, hey man, get out, jump off the back of the tank, get up in the woods, man. I'm like, you're the only guy I can save. Right. And so I got him off and got him up in the woods. And I told the driver, I'm like, look, man, just gun it backwards and hold it to the left, and hopefully it'll just pull us back enough that we'll start sliding, and then we can kind of try to turn. And it, by the grace of God, worked. The driver or the loader had to run down through all the snow and remount. But another funny story there is we actually did infantry ping pong. I used to tell this story to a couple of my infantry buddies, and they would get really pissed off about it. But we were attached to 126, Charlie Company 126, which is the unit Ross McGinnis was in. He was actually there at the time, but he's the guy that got the Medal of Honor for laying on the grenade in Baghdad later on in our deployment. But my platoon was attached to that company, and we were out there, and it was, like I said, it was just nuking every single day with snow, and we'd sit up in the our patrol base, and the infantry would walk up to warm up, and we would just be on the radio and be like, all right, shut down. And we'd shut down, and I'd have the guy back behind me like start up, and they'd go trudging through like 3 feet of snow to get over there to them, 3 or 4 feet. And we just bounced them back and forth till they got up and walked off warm from walking through all the snow. But this was like towards the end of the rotation where we were like really bored, and we were also a little mad at them too because they didn't really they didn't really use us at all. Right? They put us out on night patrol every night, so we rode around the box every single night, basically chasing the what do you call the guys that drop the arty that actually
The
work there?
OCs.
Yeah, it was the OCs, but they got the guys that actually run around doing the arty. I can't remember their nickname, but we would think that they were, like terrorists or something because that's what we were training for. We'd chase them only to find out it's just some cadre guy.
That's right. They're cadre. There was like in NTC they had like the Scorpion team or whatnot that trained with us.
Yeah.
And then whatever I never went to Germany. I really wish I got to go to Germany. But Kelly B and EFMP prevented us from doing that. But we got to do some other cool stuff. I mean, we got to go to Hawaii and be on MGSs. And
You've done your cool stuff, man.
dude,
That's your cool stories.
they kept trying to send me to Ranger School because I was a PT stud. And I remember
Yeah. I turned it down twice.
you warned me. You specifically warned me. And for chat,
I did.
this was my CO when I was in 269 Armor. I was PCSing to Hawaii, and Josh warned me, like, dude, they are going to just treat you like trash. And
Because your armor from a
yeah,
tank unit. Yeah.
and I was one of the more senior NCOs in the company, and they were trying to do the dumbest stuff. Like they would dismount the entire company for an IED to recover a vehicle. I'm like, dude, you don't like what happens when fragmentation takes out like 17 guys and you have a mass count?
Yeah.
Like
They don't conceptualize it. The guys that stay light like that just really struggled to employ armor.
They do, but once they saw the MGS fire, and I was like, dude, I am your direct fire support. And they had me running ranges. I ran EIB, and I would during the salute report and during some of the other different lanes, I'd be like, listen, I need you guys to do your job because you protect your large caliber direct fire support element from being destroyed. I can't see 360 degrees. I only have so many guns and so much slice of this pie of the battle space. And if you guys miss your targets like you're missing right now, that means that I don't get to go home. So you guys need to fix it. Like I was kind of a dick. But I don't know. It was an interesting dynamic. But so you went to OIF 0608.
I know I never got to your answer, right? Yeah, so we deployed to Baghdad for OIF 0608, right? So we left Schweinfurt in August of 2006, and we came back in November of '07. So now initially we were supposed to deploy in June of '06, and that was when Bush landed on the aircraft carrier, and he's like, the war's over, right? And everything was, they delayed our deployment indefinitely. Like we had already packed the connexes and everything, and so we unpacked and went to a gunnery. And then they were like, that was when the sectarian violence kicked off, and they're like, oh my god, no, go now. And so we had to like come back and rush back from Grafenwehr, we the unit, and like pack everything up and then go to Baghdad. And so I got to Kuwait in August, like late August of '06, and in October of '06 we moved forward from Camp Burin into Fob Falcon up in South Baghdad. We were up on Fob Falcon there, like I said, until November of '07. So when we got there, it was kind of like the height of the sectarian violence, right? And so our first mission, I was at that point, I was the executive officer. So in Kuwait, this is an important part. In Kuwait, I moved over to be the XO of Alpha 177, and we were attached to 118 Infantry. We were their armor company. So we went up, and at that point became a mechanized infantry team up there in Baghdad. And really, we took over. Our company took over OP San Juan. OP San Juan was this hunting tower that Saddam Hussein had in one of his lodges, and it was just south of Bayab. And so we occupied it. We had a flare up there, and we used it to try to interdict surface to air missiles for aircraft coming into to land at Biop. And it was all just fields out there, right? You had sparse kind of farms and stuff like that. And
I'll throw in some
certainly
photos of that area.
Yeah,
It's just empty wasteland.
it's empty. It's high. It's like, high grass, canals everywhere. You have palm groves all over the place. But, for the most part, you can kind of see for a good distance. As you get closer to the city, you get more canals and like some really heavy palm groves, which, we got in a lot of fights in there. And I tell you, man, it was like you'd think you were in Vietnam at times, especially in the fall when it's like raining a lot. You're in this high grass and palm groves and picking up AK-47s. It's
And so were you
uh,
were on tanks, you were engaging with coax, main gun, or what was were you on Humvees, or were you kind of a
So we
hybrid?
had a little bit of mix of everything, right? So we obviously went over there with our tanks. We had M1A1s, Ames, M1A1 Ames, and then we fell in on a bunch of M1A1 Deltas that were down there as TPE. And then so we kind of ran a mix, and it was kind of dependent on whatever. We had some platoons that would run all four tanks. We had the hunter killer teams, where we had platoons that were running two tanks, two Humvees. Um, um, sometimes we had platoons that were just running all trucks, depending on where they were and what they were doing, what their missions were at the time. Um, but yeah, mostly tanks. And then we started out really no main gun. And I can tell you when we really first used it, I think it was January 10th, 2007, right? We got in speaking of palm groves, there was a big incident there. This is actually on YouTube where one of our tanks hit a deep buried IED, and it blew up and it severed the controls from the driver's panel to the pack. It also came up through the FRH drainage valve, caused some shrapnel damage to the sub turret. Really, it wounded both the driver and the TC. The driver, and comms went out too. The driver couldn't control it. He actually evac'd out with the tank in motion, going into a canal, helped evac the TC, and the gunner got off under fire from small arms fire from across the palm grove, and egressed with them, got them to cover while the wingman tank came up. And actually started engaging. And at that point, we had been given the canister rounds, right? And like we were unfamiliar with canister rounds. I'm not even sure that anybody, and maybe probably some of the older guys had seen one, but it was we were pretty new to it, and they let one fly
Understandably
that
so.
day, and yeah, it was like it was kind of a big deal. Everybody was talking about it, and it was an even bigger deal because the by that point the command sergeant major was with the patrol and he had pulled up, and him and the FSO were out there and they were just a little forward from what they should have been, and it like completely disoriented them. Like they like I think one of the lower enlisted guys had to like come like guide them to like safety because they were
That's wild,
yeah
man. That when that round goes off, I fired a bunch of those out of the 105. And there's
yeah
a video of me shooting one. My driver, we were in the defensive position. He was recording. We were in Korea. We jumped over there when I was in Hawaii, and I fired one. And you can hear me laughing maniacally because all of the troop targets were killed by this one thing. As you switch to coax immediately after to suppress, like what? And I killed everything with one round. I was like, oh my god! Like
yeah
that's an effective round. Like they built that
we
thing.
we ended up shooting a lot more of them. Yeah, we had there was another story actually, because at that time you really had to get like you had to have like colonel or above, '06 or above permission, to fire a main gun round, but they had given us these can rounds. So this was I was actually commanding the company at the time. My commander was on R&R, and we just switched brigades. We went up, we fell up under at that point. What was it? It was another fourth brigade, First Infantry Division. They just stood this brigade up, and they came in. This was when the surge happened, and they came in, and so he comes in to do a tour of our fob, and I'm the acting commander at the time, and I'm like nervous as I can be, right? Because here's this colonel and I've got to like brief this colonel. I'm the commander at the time, like, and I'm still just an XO, and it was a big deal to me, right? And I wanted to make sure I did it right, and I did. So I'm sitting there waiting for him to show up, and like I hear, we've got a platoon in contact, and it's a tank platoon, and they get into, I think it was our mortar platoon was with them also. The mortar platoon was attached to us, and we used them as motorized infantry. So they were in contact right on the south end of our AO, and one of my junior tank commanders decided to engage with a can round. He had a like a fire team of infantry dismounts run across an alley in front of them. They were all armed, and he just lit them up with a can round, right? And I'm like, I'm flipping out. I'm like, oh, you just got me fired. Like the colonel is coming here. Like the guy that has to approve that by general order is coming here. And you just, I'm like, I didn't know what to say, man. I'm just like, oh my God, how am I going to explain this? I'm like, Jesus, man.
In his
And
defense,
like,
at least he could say, "Well, sir, I bet they won't do that again."
oh, no, like it gets so they come back, they gather like their war trophies, right? And they come back, and the colonel's still not there, right? They come in one side of the fob, right? And they park their tanks, and they get out, and they go in the fob entrance, or not the fob, excuse me. I keep saying fob, I mean cop, the cop. They come back the one side of the cop. They go to the cop entrance, and they lay out like this bandolier, like a Chinese AK bandolier, that's like blood soaked, got holes all in it. There's a couple of AK mags that have like, ball bearing holes through them. A shirt that's all mangled and bloody and full of holes. And they're all just sitting around laughing about it. And I'm just like mortified. And then on the other end of the cop, our other entrance, comes the colonel. And I'm just like, man, it's been nice knowing y'all. I'm like, I don't know what to say, right? So he comes, he gets out of his truck. I go salute him, I greet him, I welcome him. I'm like, well, sir, uh, this is platoon. They're just coming back off patrol. They just engaged a fire team size element of guys, and we actually engaged them with the main gun. I just sold it. I was like, and I said, we had an opportunity, to use the main gun, the new round we have that, just doesn't have the range, and it's a lot safer to use in the city. and we actually were to get like 4 KIA right here. And he walks up and it looks, and at this point, there's like flies all over it too, right? Because you're in Baghdad. It's like, it's just this bloody mess of like enemy equipment with flies all over it. And just, it's just, he looks at it and he's like, nice. And walks inside. And I'm like,
I love it. I love it.
never said it. Never said a word about it. Never said a word about it.
And that's the kind of leadership that is so important to have. I'm messing with my mic. I've got some weird mic issues. I love that kind of leadership that as soon as something needs to be done and the tankers use the initiative, it's like, all right, guys, I got you. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You killed them. You did the right thing. I'm going to move out. You know, and then you see so much, as you are well aware of, so much micromanagement that it just gets so toxic. There are toxic levels.
Yeah. But you want to get on, just staying on the topic of main gun. Another interesting story on that. So as we're talking '07, the height of the Iraq War, right? Was '07. '06, I think, was the highest casualty month of the war. I think 136 service members, I think give or take, were killed in June of 2007 alone. So we were there right when all that happened. We started with the sectarian violence. The surge hit. That brigade came in, the enemy had the spring offensive, things got really heated in Baghdad was a real focal point of all of it. That was when Petraeus was there with his whole coin stuff. And it was hot and heavy. And we got to a point where, we were in contact with the enemy every single day, right? We were running patrol schedules and, our patrols were coming in contact with the enemy. And it was a lot of IEDs. It was a lot of EFPs, right? Our AO was divided. We had the Jaish Ahmadi, we on the northern side, we had, it was basically Shia, and we were fighting a lot of Jaish Ahmadi, right? Militia, Ahmadi militia. Am I saying that right? Jam. And south side was a more Sunni area where we were fighting a lot of, Al Qaeda insurgents and foreign fighters down there. And there was this one like 4-lane highway that went through that was no man's land where they fought each other. It was crazy. It was a really weird dynamic, really weird battlefield. But it got so heavy. And I don't remember what month it was, but we were just getting hit with EFPs. We were taking a lot of casualties. And I remember we were on a patrol and the brigade commander, somebody got hit. I can't remember who it was, some infantry platoon. And he at that point made sure that he's like, from moving on from this point on, you're going to make sure that there's a tank on every single patrol, right? You're going to get Alpha Company. You're going to make sure a tank is on every single patrol we put out. And when we get, hit by an IED, you're to fire a can round into the nearest possible trigger point. The brigade or the battalion commander told us that on the net. And it became the Wild West. We would be on patrols. I remember it was my birthday, July 12th, 2007. Because I was like, oh my God, I almost died on my birthday. We were going down Route Ash in Baghdad, and I think we had a full tank platoon, and I was running a log pack, but I wasn't in the LMTV. I jumped into the loader's hatch because I was going from the fob to the cop, and I was riding in the loader's hatch as kind of a taxi, right, out there. And I remember we got hit by an EFP. It hit one of the tanks. It did minimum damage, and that turret just turned, right? And just blasted. And we're on this 4-lane road. It was Route Ash. I mean, think something like, like Broadway in Nashville, right? You got 4 lanes and a sidewalk, but it's kind of tight with like 4-story buildings all around. And just let this can round. It was middle of the night. Let it go into this, like business that was down there. And then, of course, like coaxes, 50 cals. Like I remember I had a 240 up there, like it was loaded, and I'm just like pulling the trigger and like just this. It was a little ridiculous. Iraq was a little crazy back then.
Yeah, much different than my experience in 2009, 2010. It was very calm and placid, and I ate an EFP. I'm alive. We almost took our. I mean, we almost took our Humvee, but at the last minute we took our MRAP, and if we would have taken our Humvee, it would have gone through Quzada's head, taken my legs off and into Yang's head. So I'm glad that we didn't. But it was last minute, and we were the lead truck rolling out to Kalsu which is 2 hours
Yeah.
away. And I'm like, dude, I'm not taking a Humvee on Cleveland, like driving 2 hours or an hour, whatever it was, to go do rollover training because the infantry can't seem to drive vehicles. And on the way back, we got hit
Yeah.
because, of course, we did.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, that's how our deployment started right out of the gate. The Bravo Company 177, where I was a platoon leader, that company, one of the sister platoons, they were the Ford element and immediately took a casualty. EFP killed a private and a sergeant. The sergeant was a really good friend of mine, Jason Merrill. We actually, would hang out in the clubs in Schweinfurt and went to like Rock Park in Nuremberg, together. Good dude, really, really good kid, man. But he was our first KIA, him and one of the privates. And then when we got up there a couple of weeks later, uh, during our recons, right seat, left seat riding, our S3, his truck during the recons got hit by the EFP. I can't remember. It killed a couple of guys. It like really wounded him, like very, very badly. Like he left and never came back, and it's probably still struggling with it. But yeah, it took the gunner's legs off. I think killed the driver. Yeah, it was really rough. Like right out of the gate. And
Yeah.
I was going out on my first patrol. We were actually loading up, and that actually happened at checkpoint 543, I think it was. That went from it was right where Route Jackson turned into Route Irish and went into the green zone right there. I think it's checkpoint 543 right there. That was right where it happened. And we heard it, right? And it came on the radio that it happened. And I'm like, holy crap, man, I got to go right through that same spot. We rolled right through it, man. Like they were still, cleaning up the wreckage there from it when we rolled by. And I'm like, holy shit, welcome to Iraq.
It's a wild thing, man. That well, so if I can ask, because I think it's going to help, just paint folks who, because right now we're in a peacetime army, right? What? How did your company react? What was the support like? How did people react when you guys took KIA and wounded in action? How did everything go down? Like, was it?
Um, those are tough questions. So a couple of things I can say that our company Organic, our tank company, Alpha Company 177, didn't suffer any KIA. We had 30-40% wounded in action. We were in the fight. We had dismounted guys. We had, multiple EFPs and deep burieds go off. A lot of guys got Purple Hearts, but we managed to survive. And that's just sheer luck. But we had an infantry platoon attached to us that had a truck full of infantrymen get killed. And then our company, and then, our sister companies that were over in Ramadi and on the other side of Baghdad were taking casualties. They had several KIAs, right? And so there was a lot of our brigade, 2nd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division as a whole lost 109 killed in action on that deployment.
That's a lot of
So
people. That is a
yeah,
lot
it
of
was a lot of
freaking
people,
people.
and I mean, that was collective, the whole brigade. Yeah, so it was, and like I stated earlier, Ross McGinnis, delayed on the grenade. He was in 126, our sister battalion. He was a part of that as well. So, we were there in a pretty volatile time, right? So KIA, right? So with Sergeant Beckard, he was a really good friend of mine. So he was a infantry squad leader with us, attached to us. He was a good friend of mine. Him and his truck crew, they got killed. That was a really rough day, right? And at that point, I mean, you're looking at that was May 30th that happened. We had been there for a while at that point. We'd taken a lot of casualties. The guys around us battalion was taking a lot of casualties. We were already taking a lot of wounding. We were getting kind of hardened with it. And oh, by the way, we kept getting delayed, right? We thought we were on our original timeline. Well, we weren't, and so they bumped us, and then the surge hit and we hit, now they're putting us out 15 months. And so morale was really low, right? So how did we take it, man? I mean, I'll cover we had Sergeant Crossman. I'll remember he put it the best way. he had a tank, had a deep buried IED, and they were running a 3-man crew, thankfully, and it wounded all 3 crew members, blew the tracks and the wheels off, road wheels off, right? Really messed the tank up. Deadlined it completely, destroyed it. Um, they went up to the green zone up there. They got up there, they got their medical treatment, they got their Purple Hearts. They were sent back down, told drink water, take ibuprofen for a week, get back after it. And I remember Sergeant Crossman, he took them right back on patrol. He made sure that the moment he was allowed to get them back out there and on a patrol, and it might not have been a week, I don't remember how long it was, but they were RTD, right? They were still a little banged up. But I remember Crossman was like, you got to get them right back out on patrol. You can't let them sit in the barracks over there and dwell on it and get all up in their head. You got to get them back out of there and patrol and function. And he did that. And I was sitting there thinking, man, he's right. Like, because you sitting here, like, I'm sitting here on the five as the XO all the time in my head. Like, I need to get out, get, less idle hands here.
No, that's great. Getting the guys back out there is so important. I mean, what they happened with us, like Q got hit, they rotated crews. So if you got hit, you got like pretty much bumped back in the order of march after you. I think it was like 24, 48 hours. Like you had to like just be monitored to make sure that you weren't all jacked up from TBI or whatever,
Yeah.
and then just back out the gate.
Yeah. Being the XO, I was able to really kind of be versatile. I had my own tank, I had my own truck, but I could really jump in anybody's loader's hatch at any time. And I took advantage of that. And with the infantry platoon, I went out with them a lot, right? And I got in a lot of, had a lot of action with those guys. And then, being on our cop that we had out there, Cop Norris there in Baghdad, a lot of poker nights and stuff like that. So I'll tell you a story that stuck with me for a long time. That's really stuck with me. And like I said, we were taking a lot of casualties up to that point, and I was going to that chapel a lot. We were doing a lot of memorial services. That blast happened. There were 4 people in that Humvee. That blast happened on May the 30th, 2007. 3 soldiers were killed, immediately or within an hour of that, right? Becker survived. He had a gas line blow up and sever and douse him in gasoline. He was pulled out on fire and suffered first-degree burns over like 90% of his body. And I can tell you, if you want to hear some horror stories about that Bradley ride up to the BIOP there or up to the green zone to get on that chopper, he survived 14 days. They got him to Sam Houston, Texas, where they proceeded to systematically amputate everything on his body in an effort to save him until he expired on January or June the 14th. I went to the other 3 guys' memorial service, and it was so hard for me. And when Beckert finally died, I remember I was at the TMC, right? Like, I can't remember what I had going on. I think I had like, hill spurs. And I was being seen for that. And that's where I found out he died. And it was the TMC guy told me that. Well, not Doc. Doc was the platoon guy. What would you call the guy at the TMC that's assigned to your unit? Whatever. That guy. And I remember he said, "Thank God. Thank God he's dead." And I was sitting there for a moment. I was kind of shocked because he was my friend. And I'm like, just for a split second. Then
Yeah, it's not.
I was like, thank God. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Thank fucking God he's dead, man. Like, he begged him. In the back of the Bradley, he begged him to shoot him. He was screaming, just shoot me, just shoot me, just shoot me. And that really, dude, that really fucked those guys up really bad, like really bad, right?
Yep.
But I didn't go to his memorial service. I walked out of my barracks, man, and I was going to the chapel, and I just turned. I turned and I went down to the motor pool and I sat up on my tank alone in the motor pool, and I sat there for like 3 hours, and I never went to another memorial service.
That'll do it. And
Never went to another one.
that's awful. May he rest in peace. That's just shit. It's just shit. I hate when I was going through college, I was writing about the war in Iraq and all the different causes and things, and it just irritates me to think about it. It just irritates me to think about it. Um, but uh, we just have to live for those guys. Um, I lost friends in Afghanistan. Um, just it's hard watching it, because I watch it from afar.
Yeah.
I watch the wife via Facebook and how she goes through it, and how she was going through it, and I was just like, this is awful.
Yeah.
But that's war. Um,
It is. It's a reality and it's a hard thing to deal with. And the general alpha male doesn't deal with it very well. And the army tries. The army, I think, when you're an active duty soldier, there are actually a lot of resources available to you, but there's a stigma about it. There really is. And I
mm-hmm.
can tell you, maybe later on in this, we'll get to where I was when I finally did something about it. But it was hard. And I remember, going back to 269 armor, I remember at one point sitting in my office because I was struggling, dude. I was struggling with a lot of stuff, not only the war, which I was really struggling with, but a lot of personal stuff. And I remember looking at all the platoon sergeants and thinking about how everybody in there is struggling. Because I know those guys. I know a lot of what was going on in their lives. I knew they were struggling. They would, we had some badass guys. We had some badass platoon sergeants
No,
and
we
senior
did.
NCOs in that company, man. And you had a lot of combat experience in that company. Not just organically, with the previous deployment, but coming from other units as well. And I remember looking at everybody. I said, everybody. I remember thinking to myself, everybody in this room is hurting so bad.
It
And
was
it was
a
still probably a year before I did anything to get help.
dude. I got to that unit right when they had gotten back from Solder City, and I got there. I touched down right. When I came out of Korea, I didn't go straight to Iraq. I went to Korea for a year to go party and hang out, and I got back to a unit that was hurting. They were hurting
Yeah,
real bad. They lost a lot of guys. A lot of guys got hurt. Um, it was a very difficult transition
yeah,
for me, going from party mode to like, dude, we're going to war, and just like, hey, dude, this squared away guy on my previous deployment, Iskandaria, he thought it was high speed. First patrol out the gate, got smoked. Like, oh my
yeah,
god, and just all like story after story after story of that. Of like, hey, this was a great guy. He engineer guy was attached to our company. He was like, could as soon as they pinned the Purple Heart on him, he was shaking. He could barely stand up. Was about to go home 2 weeks later, and he got killed. And like,
yeah,
dude, just stuff like that, and it hits you like a heat round right in the
yeah,
soul. And you're just like, dude, I need to
yeah.
harden the fuck up. I like this is not a
Oh, that
game.
was part of that. Yeah, that was part of our S3 story as well. He got wounded and sent home, but the outgoing S3 on his last patrol got killed. Like it's crazy, dude.
It's not a game. It's
Not a game.
it's real stuff, and people deal with real stuff, and there is no HR. Being in civilian world now, there's an HR to talk to. When somebody loses their shit downrange and starts smacking the turret wall, you're it, sergeant,
Yeah,
lieutenant, captain. You're it. You have to manage that. You have to manage
we
that.
had we had a first sergeant get out of his truck in Iraq and shoot himself in the head on a patrol.
I don't even know what to
I'm,
fucking say to that. That just, but
but I'm
it
not even I'm
happens. It
not even
happens.
kidding you. They were on a patrol and dude just got out, shot himself in the head.
That's insane. But that's
First
what
sergeant.
happens. That's what happens to some people when you put that complex amount of trauma, and it builds and
Yeah,
builds and builds, especially with the op tempo that we were in. I mean, more so you because you were a little bit, well, you're a couple years my senior, I guess you could say. The op tempo at that moment was just 15-month deployment, come back for 6 months to a year, right back out the gate. It was just insane. And what that was
yeah,
doing for guys, didn't they had to compartmentalize. Then they go home, they try and be dad, they try and be husband, and they go right back out and they lose guys, and they just don't know where to put all that hurt. And
yeah,
it just takes something to
yeah.
just trigger that.
One
And
of my biggest observations, like going back to living in Schweinfurt, nice city, a lot of fun, a lot of clubs, bars, German women everywhere, right? I went there. I was having the time of my life, right? For, what, I can't remember, a year, 2 years or something like that before I deployed. I remember going back 15 months later, and it was like it hadn't changed. It hadn't like changed in centuries, right? But I had changed so much that it was just so weird, right? Like I didn't feel comfortable in my skin being there because, like, it was just like 15 months of my life where I had just traumatic event after traumatic event. And just all of a sudden, I'm back to the same place where I used to run around and party as a young man. And I'm like, I'm not the same guy anymore. And all those soldiers, you talk about a unit that was hurting. Like it was a lot of fun before, but the clubs at that point, the bars, it was like I remember you would go in there, dudes would just be on the bar, laying down, bawling their eyes out, right? You would have guys in the corner crying, dudes just like group hugging one another, guys getting so drunk and angry. I remember this NCO just drunk, he just started getting angry and saying dudes' names and started like mashing mirrors off cars that were parked along the road, right? And I'm like, bro, like I like what you can't stop, man. Like, I mean, it was just toxic and dudes were just hurting, man. I mean, just hurting. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's hard, it's really hard. I watch, probably like everybody else, I'm watching what's going on over there in the Ukraine and everything, and just watching all this stuff on Telegram and thinking, man, them dudes are hurting too.
dude, I watch every single video that comes
Oh,
out,
I know you do.
and because I have to for the
Yeah,
page
I
just to
know
see
you
what's
do.
relevant. And
Yeah.
I don't broadcast it. It's not. But I go to church. I go to men's group
Yeah.
and I talk about it.
Yeah.
I just say, hey guys, I sorry, whatever. Um, but I just seeing a lot of that, it brings up so much, and you just see the worst parts of things. Like you'll just, I'm looking for like a tank thing, and I'm scrolling down, I'm watching some guy get droned to death, and then he's sitting there screaming
Yeah.
at the thing, and like his leg is behind him as he's trying to crawl away, and they drop 3 grenades on. Like it's just the most awful
Nightmare
things you
stuff,
can
man.
imagine,
Yeah.
and
That's,
it's creating generational hatred between. But that's a whole nother animal. We were fighting a asymmetric fight, which is very relevant when you're talking about drones nowadays, because that's an asymmetric fight. I mean, the folks in Israel had to deal with that when it first popped off. Not so much as more, but that's um, so you were in Schweinfurt. Did you deploy again after that, or did you PCS to the States, or what happened after Schweinfurt?
so I went to Germany, or excuse me, Germany. I went to Grafenberg after that for 2 years. I ended up going and working down on Seventh Army JMTC staff down there as a plans officer. So my wife is German. We got married right when we got back, and then I went down there and I did 2 years down there on staff working for a general officer. And then I went to the career course and then the 269. That was actually the only deployment I went on, was that 0608 one. And
Gotcha.
that was, yeah, I don't know
It's
how
enough.
that worked out, but I went to 269 and we never deployed there. And then, yeah, it wasn't long after that I got out.
I know some of our 269 guys are probably going to watch this. Some guys from dealer company. I hope they do. Um,
Yeah.
but in the deployment that I went on, we had our white four had come off of recruiting, and I'm sure you heard some of those stories. Blew up the 50 cal. Um, Basically, got he left. He didn't come back in country, so that was fun. And then Trammell took over. He was like white four, and they had Broughton, Blom, and some of the other guys. It was a wild time.
There was a lot of that, So talking about Fourth Brigade, First Infantry, when they came over as the surge, that was mostly built up of guys that was all like second lieutenants. They had almost no senior lieutenants. Like everybody was junior, and it was the same on the NCO side. They literally piecemealed this unit together. They had so the platoon sergeants that we had that we got is over with us as like motorized infantry basically. like a lot of those guys came off the trail or recruiting, where they had been there for a long time doing kind of different stuff with TRADOC, a lot of them like E6s and E7s that had never been deployed and stuff. And there were some funny incidents with them as well.
You went. That had to be a hell of a transition, moving from a line unit from a hella deployment. I mean, that's hellish into a staff position, and then going through MCCC and or whatever it is, and then cruising over to 269 with a unit who just got off of the deployment, and then seeing all of the because we transitioned then into like more of a peacetime, like Iraq ended, and
Well, if you remember 269, when we got there, we were the first unit in the Army to get the M1A2 SEP V2s,
yeah,
right? And at that point, we were really starting to eye Iran. So up to that point, really, we had gone to more coin, like they didn't really know what to do with tanks anymore. And then they pegged us when we started that training cycle. When I came over there, with all the other guys that came over, it was really to gear up. That was when everything was decisive action now, right? And we were going to be this decisive action unit. And that's one reason that we trained on our tanks so much. We did the old school tank training cycles, right? Like, gunneries. Our deployment to NTC was tank on tank. They hadn't done one of those tank on tank rotations like that, and I don't remember the year now, but it was a big deal. Like there was a lot of people there to watch it, right? And so I got really lucky with that, I think, because I think it would have been a little boring just to. I wanted to be on tanks. I like tanks. I fought really hard to go back to a tank unit. They're like, "Oh no, you need to go lighter striker and be diverse." I'm like, "Ah, that's cool. I want to be on tanks."
I went on strikers for you. They were fun, but they were the infantry like to take all of their undesirables and put them in vehicle crews. And me
Yeah,
being the tankers, I would train all of their vehicle crews. I would pull them under my wing, and we would create a community because the infantry hates each other. They treat each other like shit. I don't know what it is. It's just a culture like it's so
they're
abrasive.
angry.
And so
Yeah,
I would
everybody's
take
so mad in the army.
I and some of those guys, and if you watch this, I appreciate you reclassing to 19 kilo. Some of them reclassed to 19 kilo because they realized we take care of our folks for the most part, and
Yeah,
it was interesting seeing them just not plan for vehicles. They wanted to dismount a mile away from the objective, just so that the guys could walk and be exhausted and just like, oh, well, you need to prep for Ranger operate. Like, dude, we're not regiment. Like, we're a striker unit. Be a striker unit.
yeah.
Use the 50 cal to suppress the enemy, crap your troops out, pop some smoke, displace and find an alternate fighting position. Like, use your brain on this, guys. You don't need to dismount like 40 freaking tired or have 40 tired guys struggle up to an objective and then get slaughtered. Or, who am I?
The infantry really fell short on that. They love themselves, right? And they love to talk about themselves. But they're hung up on the Rangers, and Rangers are cool. You can't take anything away from them, right? And you really can't take anything away from the infantry. They're badasses, but it's like they do fall short with conceptualizing mounted maneuver warfare, right? Where the armor school really capitalized on that, right? I mean, like the United States Army are experts at mounted maneuver warfare. And I really enjoyed being an armor officer for that, right? And so when I went to the career course, this was before the armor school moved down. I went to the career course in 2010, which they came down around then, but they were still doing when I signed up for the infantry for the Fort Benning career course, they were still doing one at Fort Knox, right? You had the armor and the infantry for a while. Then they became the maneuver career, captain's career course. And so I went to Benning just because I did kind of want to get that exposure and because my family was from Atlanta. But it was interesting. Yeah, there were some guys in there, really, really brilliant infantrymen, but they had been light the whole time. And, when you're going through all like the training exercises and op orders and like they didn't know what to do with the tanks or the heavy equipment or how to
It's
employ mounted, like
you can move
warfare.
you can take so much more ground. You're so much more rapid when it comes
Yeah.
to, hey dude, we're going to be 20 clicks north in a lot less time than it takes to walk. Like, this is not a
Yeah.
full 8-hour day for us to move 20 clicks with all these freaking knuckleheads. Like, we'll be there
Yeah.
shortly. We'll be there within the hour. Um,
Yeah.
and we will be ready to. And I'm so thankful that when I was in Korea, Bravo company right next to us in 2-9. One of their platoon sergeants then came to Hawaii to be our first sergeant, and he was a Bradley guy, and he loved the tankers. Like we just gelled. We just gelled. First on Breakfield night, we just gelled. And he was like, "Yeah, get the MGS out there. I wanted to freaking start shooting stuff." Like, all right, bro, we'll get it up there.
Yeah.
It was good to see.
Get the heavy weapons in action.
Like, yeah, we're gonna lay down some fire, you know. And this is prior to the drone threat, which now I hate the buzzword
Wow.
that's floating around, game changer, but it's a freaking game changer until we can get directed energy weapons fielded in mass,
Yeah.
or get jammers that can jam those damn things at altitude.
Yeah.
I mean, in Iraq we had, and this is kind of a touchy subject to talk about, is electronic warfare, just because there's a lot that we can't discuss, but there were jamming bubbles. I think that's
Yeah.
Googleable. You can see there's jamming bubbles and there's
Oh,
limitations.
I'm pretty sure that's common knowledge at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I mean, you just have to make the jamming bubble bigger, like the Starship Enterprise, increase the shield
Yeah.
size, you know, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just
uh,
it's interesting to see. So you got out. Did you get out after Fort Benning? Did you PCS anywhere else after that? After 269?
no, I went over. So there's an overlaying story here. One of the reasons that I went over to Grafenwehr for 2 years, I hit a back injury for a long time. I injured my back, and I was actually in the hospital when we got our orders to go to Iraq to go now, right? And so I'm sitting there laying in a hospital in Germany, can barely move, and the brigade gets the orders. Like, this was, I told you we were going to go, then they delayed us.
Mm-hmm.
This was the, oh my God, go now. And I'm sitting there like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm the guy that his back's hurt right when we got to go. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. So I got up and walked out of the hospital, like limped out of the hospital. Got back, packed my stuff up. I was in a lot of pain. Had some friends kind of help me out, you know, especially when it came to carrying stuff, getting it in connexes. And then kind of really worked on healing it the first part of the deployment, but I really kind of struggled with it a lot, you know. And then I was in some blast envelopes and stuff, and it just, you know, carrying that heavy equipment around and
Yeah.
whatnot. So I went to Grafenwehr. I could barely walk, right? I would stand up and fall over, and then I had to go to the career course. I'm like, this is going to be a career ender for me, right? And so I probably should have got back surgery back then, but I was really afraid of it because that would have been a great time to do it, right? I was on a joint multinational staff, right, over there. But I went and I worked on just getting, because all I had to do, I couldn't show up to the career course on a profile. And the first thing I had to do was pass a PT test,
Of
right? And I was
course.
struggling to run, right? I had a freaking blown out disc in my back. So I got there, I got off profile like 30 days before reporting. I was able to pass my run with like 2 seconds left on the clock, right? I went straight from the PT field to the TMC, got put back on a profile, and then I got through career course. And then between career course and going to 269, I had back surgery. So I was somehow able to kind of get under the radar a little bit with it, right? And the doctor was like, I'll have you playing football in 3 months. And I'm like, that dude, I can't have been able to walk in like 2 years, right? So no kidding. I had 30 days convalescent, and I reported to 269 in an absolutely F ton of pain, and not saying a word about it. And somehow the battalion commander found out about it. And he's like, I'll make you take a PT test, make you sure you can pass it. And I was sweating it to death. And then he just never did. And I was like, but no kidding, it progressively got better. You know, I had to wean myself off the pain pills because this was before they really started cracking down on it. And, you know, in my defense, I was in a lot of pain. And so,
Yeah.
like, a year before and a year afterwards, I was taking copious amounts of like narcotic pain meds that they had me on because they were outsourcing me to pain clinics over there in Columbus, Georgia, that were just pharmaceutical, like legal drug dealers. Um, and so that kind of sucked as well. I did that while I was in command, weaned myself off pain pills because I went and told them, I'm like, I don't want to take these pain pills anymore. And they're like, well, you have to. And they were a private pain clinic, right? And this was right before they started like really cracking down on them. And so they started drug testing me to make sure I was taking the pain meds. So I
What
actually
the
weaned
hell?
myself off of them. It was so weird. I know. I was mad about it too. I'm like, no wonder we have a drug problem in this country. So I weaned myself off of them. I finally got off of them right probably around the end of 2011, which was right about the year mark of my surgery. And dude, man, I wouldn't want to. I'd be in a lot of pain right now. Take a pain pill. That sucked. But
Absolutely.
I digress. What was the question? Goodness,
Oh,
went off
just
on a tangent there.
no, the great stuff, man. That's a hell of a testament to your tenacity and willingness to just get after it, despite being
Dude,
in
it
incredible amount
sucked,
of
man.
pain.
I'm because I mean, look, 269 was no joke. Third Infantry, I mean, U.S. Army is no joke. We worked our butts off. I mean, we were doing PT every single morning. We were doing fit to fight. I mean, we got those tanks. We were on and off the tanks. Oh, I was in a lot of pain doing all that stuff, man. It sucked. I fell off a tank one time. We were somewhere out there at Benning, I think, kind of near. I forget one of the training areas out there, and I freaking fell off a tank, and I landed on my feet and jolted my back, and I'm like, oh my god, it hurt, right? But I'm like, it was okay. I walked it off.
Jeez.
That was the scariest thing in the world, man. That surgery, I mean, it actually did pretty good, right? Like, and I'll be honest, like after it healed up, I felt like I was 15 again. So, like getting several months into my command there with 269, I was finally able to run every single day and kind of carry all my equipment without being in agonizing pain like I'd been like 3 years, prior to that.
That's good though. I mean, how and you're able to do all kinds of stuff now. You're constantly
I do, yeah.
you're getting after it, and I love to see that. That's just um, kind of a segue. So you got out after Fort Benning. Did you go anywhere else after that, or you just got out of 269?
Yeah, my back. I went over to 216 Cav over there, and I took a cavalry troop command. And then I mean, my back went out again over there, right? I was over there running with all those guys, and so it went out again over there. And then with it came just a lot of depression, man. Because I mean, I got to the point, I was over there as part of A Bolick, training, second lieutenants over
Yeah.
there, and I had foreign national, and I was one of two troops in the U.S. Army that trained Marine Corps lieutenants, also, that were branch tankers, which they don't have anymore.
Rip.
But yeah, no, my back ended up going out again over there, and man, with it just came a bunch of depression. And then at that point, the Army's like, well, we've already given you a surgery, right? So they med boarded me, and yeah, that was it. Like my career was over. I was no longer fit to fight. And I tell you what, man, you talk about a very dark point in my life. I mean, that was a terribly dark point in my life because the Army was all I'd known. I had been in so much pain for so many years. It had gotten better, and then it went out again. I was like, man, my career's over. What am I going to do? I've got two kids. How am I going to feed my family? It was that was a really dark time in my life. And, but I got out, and I was hired immediately. I was hired on with the railroad. I was a railroad manager, and they moved me. I started with them exactly 2 weeks after I got out, and they moved me up to Nashville. And I got up to Nashville, and we just absolutely fell in love with Nashville, and we've been
Hmm.
there. Kind of planning on staying there for a little while.
I'd say so. It looks like you're
Actually,
established.
yeah, kind of love it.
That's that's good stuff, man. There's so many guys that get out and just go. It's more, I'd say, in the enlisted side where guys get out and they go back to what they know, and they have changed, especially the OIF and
Yeah,
OIF and OEF guys. That
yeah.
it just they sit there, they try and link back up with their friends, but they don't really know how to.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. I'm just so thankful that I'm from San
I know.
Diego. I was able to get back and get dialed into the veteran community, push into the Marine Corps and the Navy folks, and I'm a little bit different, but I'm a lot more of a Marine than I am Navy, even though I love to surf. We kind of glanced over a thing where we were in the same company together. I was in the arms room. I think so. By the time that you took over, I think I had moved from first platoon to the arms room. I think so.
Yes.
So the
Yeah,
last,
I remember you being in the arms room the whole time.
yep. So I was in first platoon. I was on the whole platoon or the whole deployment. I was in first platoon, and then the last month, Bill's our supply guy was went home early. and they had me go to Kalsu to turn in all of our crap, including our
Yeah.
tanks, including all of the things that they had signed for, a 5 ton with all flat tires that I had to coordinate getting dragged across the fob and turned in. And we turned in some stuff, and I remember turning it into the guy, our Pat Yard guy, and we got rocketed in the freaking rocket took off the front end of this vehicle that we had turned in, and I had I had the paper, and I was like, fuck it, it's yours now.
You bought it.
Yep, that was that was a
It
wild time. Um, and then I
was
went back.
unreal, man. Iraq was crazy.
It was, and I got out, and I got hired immediately for Northrop Grumman, and I was working in logistics for them for a unmanned system program called Bacon, which was
Yeah.
it's a flying cell tower. Basically, it just flies and does donuts in the sky. It's still a program to this day. Buddies of mine are still on contract for that. And I went over to Afghanistan and got, so I got both theaters, right? I went to both Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was on in Kandahar and just saw the wildest stuff. It was a ghost town. Kandahar was a ghost town by the time that I was there. But I got out and I hopped around, and I from talking to some of the HR folks, they say that it's quite common to see that a lot of the Army and the Marine Corps veterans will job hop, and it'll look like we are schizophrenic because our resume has like 38 different things on it. I'm like, I didn't really thought about it because some of us are struggling to find a home, but some of the people are just incredibly stable. They do the same thing for 20 years. I don't get the rhyme or reason.
Yeah, I don't buy that, right? Because the common thing these days, it's pretty common to hop around a lot, right? And I do a lot of recruiting and I do a lot of hiring. So a little bit of what I do right now is I'm a corporate manager with a large home improvement sales organization. I run 5 territories. I have all the managers and all the staff there report to me. I go around and I run those operations. I do a lot of recruiting, right? Particularly for managers. I read a lot of resumes, do a lot of interviewing. So it's, kind of the new thing, right? Is to hop around a little bit, right? Because companies can't always offer you promotions. The old school way of doing things is you would go to a company and you would stay there till, 30 years till they gave you your pocket watch and, with your name engraved on it and you left. And you got a pension from them forever, well, nobody gives pensions anymore, maybe the government, but, everybody's got 401ks now. And so
Yep.
it's easier to like, hey, I don't need to stick here for my pension. I can take it with me and go over here to somewhere else where I can make more money. And, maybe they're growing, and depending on what industry you're in as well, right? Like, like you get a lot of companies come and go. I live in a very wealthy area, that have a lot of entrepreneurs that live in it and they do all kinds of different stuff. They'll go to companies, they'll help build them up or, to a point where they can sell them and then they go on to the next one. So I guess it really depends on how you read the resume. I would say that's kind of a blanket statement.
No, I got you. My resume looks like an absolute mess. I worked in logistics, and then I was like, I got my degree. I was working full time while I was going to school full time, and I had 2 young kids at home. And I was falling asleep driving home, and I almost hit a guardrail. And at that point, I was like, hell no, I'm not doing this. So I switched to online school full time, and it cut the VHA or whatever it is, the housing allowance, like in half, if not more. And I was like, you know what? Me coming home at night is more important than me getting a few hundred extra bucks. I'll manage. I'll budget. Yeah. And so I got my degree and I was working in logistics. And I was like, you know what? I really need to make more money. And so I jumped into quality assurance and I was good at it, but Paul's not a quality assurance guy. Like I can't do that. I cannot measure cables and pin and like I can do it. I just don't want to. And doing first article inspections, and I moved to industrial security, and I worked for a micromanager. And so I was like, nope. I got a job doing role-playing training manager. So I was working with the Iraqis, the Afghans. I was blowing up Marines, getting in gunfights every day. I loved it. And then COVID happened.
Awesome.
And we couldn't do anything. They closed the doors. I got laid off, and I bounced around, and I went into logistics again, remotely working for Walgreens. And then I my manager was like, screw this. And so she dragged me over to be a construction project manager. And Paul has never worked construction a day in my life. And I was managing remodels of stores. And then that contract ended. They laid off half of our team for no rhyme or reason. Just there was a reason, and I saw it coming. But I didn't get another job in time, so now I moved over to construction at another company.
Well, my company, man, like I had to go in November. I had to go to three different offices in the same day in Evansville, Louisville, and Lexington, Kentucky, and lay off five different people in a company wide riff.
That sucks.
I'm just like, dude, I hate it, man. I got pulled over. I got a speeding ticket between Louisville and Lexington because I'm just like, this is the crappiest day of my life. Like, I hired all these people, I trained them, and they were managers and they were good dudes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go lay them off, and I'm just, they had to go to all of them that same day and do it face to face, and I'm just like, dude, it was just a terrible day.
That really sucks.
Like, when's my turn, right? I'm watching the
Yeah,
economy, like it's rough in construction right now. I mean, that's the backbone of our company.
that's what I was doing. I was building dental offices. I had 15 dental offices that I was building, which was very freaking stressful.
Yeah.
It was just constant chaos. Like, oh, well, somebody broke in and stole half of our copper, or, oh, the roof collapsed, or like just, we got leaks, so all of our drywall's wet, and like just all of it at once. And it was, but I built them. I built them well.
Yeah.
Just construction is what it is. So let's talk about how you got from where you were kind of in a dark place in the Army after you got out into where you are now, because you've really made a name for yourself. You're like, what helped you really flourish and get to where you are now?
I quit drinking. Straight up. I'll tell you right up, I quit drinking. There's another overlaying story to the whole thing. So not only did my back go out when I went over to 216, but right before I took that Cavalry Troop Command, my stepdad, who had been in my life since I was a little kid, died. A few months later, my granddad, a major influence on my life, died. Right. And then fast forward almost a year to the day, my dad died. Right. So all that happened while I was going through my re-injuring my back, depression, getting med board, my whole life's falling apart, everybody's dying. It was a really bad time in my life, right? Like, it was terrible. And I remember right before, my back was already bad, but I remember sitting in my desk in my command post over there in 216 in just a fog and a haze. And I was just sitting there staring at the wall. And I'm like, I need help. I need help. So I got up and I went to the TMC and I just told him, I said, I need help. Like, I'm depressed, right? Like, I'm just in a haze. I
Yeah.
can't, like, I don't know what's going on. So I started talking to some people over there, and I went and I did a little residency program for PTSD and stuff like that. And that's where I really realized I drank a lot, like a lot. I come from a family of alcoholics. My dad is an alcoholic, or was an alcoholic and an addict. My granddad, great people in my life, had struggled with it. And I kind of came to accept that I was struggling with it too. I drank a lot. A lot of people in the Army drink a lot. And I
Yep.
think, being older and mature and being away from the military now, I think that's the most toxic thing that the military does, is continue to promote that alcohol culture, because alcohol is poison and it's a depressant, and the Army is a depressing job. And I don't care how you doctor it up. It's not fun to go over there and rough people up and kill them and see the gore and do like that dirty business for the government. And then you top it off with excessive, alcohol consumption. And it's just ugly, and talking about Schweinfurt, it being different when we got back, and dudes just laying down crying at bars and getting drunk and fighting one another and destroying private property and going to jail and ruining their careers because they were hurting and they were depressed and they thought the answer was alcohol, right? And that's what Ed, them, and all their buddies and platoon sergeants and XOs, and everybody was doing. It was toxic. It was really dirty and nasty. And so when all that was going on with my back re-injuring, Um, I thought, in my mind, I was numbing the pain with alcohol for years, which, I learned was just an excuse. And then, again, with all three male figures in my life dying within a year of one another, I was really hitting the bottle and it almost killed me. And so I went and I started doing that PTSD kind of therapy and stuff like that. And that was when I realized, hey, I drink too much, and I stopped drinking, and my life got better, and it got really better. And then I moved to Nashville, right? And I started drinking again, and I went back out for like 4 years, having, a great time in Nashville, drinking, partying, building my new life. And my mental health plummeted again. And things that I had processed, like war trauma from 2007, right? That I had processed, and I was, was just living and accepting. I was suddenly all upset about it all over again. Right. And it was just, and I remember thinking that, like, why am I upset about this again? It was because I was over consuming a depressant, and so about 4 years ago, I was just like, there's no value added for alcohol with me anymore. I'd already learned so many lessons on it, and why am I drinking it? And, I was fat, and I was having health issues, and I was all depressed again. And I'm like, so I just quit drinking, and my life got better. Like, it started getting better almost instantly.
Isn't it amazing how
And
that
so
happens?
it's been over 4 years, almost 4.5 years now since I've had a sip of alcohol. And I don't tell anybody how to live their life. It's their business. People can do what they want to do, but that's just my story, and it worked for me.
No, I love to hear that. That's very encouraging, and I know there's a lot of folks who struggle and are struggling, and that can
Yeah.
serve as encouragement. Like, hey, dude, it can work, and it does work. Not it can, it works. So,
It
uh,
it does work. Alcohol is nasty. It's a very nasty, powerful, cunning, baffling drug.
it is. It absolutely is.
But look, man, there's nothing wrong with it. It's legal. People have done it forever. I mean, like, as far back as the Bible, right? Like, again, I don't tell anybody how to live their life. I just, for me, it's poison. It's
No, it is. It
it
absolutely is.
just it doesn't work with me, and I had a really toxic family and a really toxic childhood, and a lot of it I attribute to alcoholism with, my family. My granddad, great guy, bad alcoholic, right? And he left a mess. My dad was an alcoholic and an addict, not really as nice of a guy, but had a lot of problems, and always had a bottle in his hand,
Man,
amongst other things.
I'm just trying to raise my kiddos the best that I can. That's one thing that the most important thing in my life has been being a dad. Uh, that
And it should
has
be.
that has helped me just recover. I had when I got out, I had a lot of and even while I was in, I had a lot of extreme hobbies, and that's kind of how I channeled some of the stress and some of the
Like what?
I masked the negativity, and I would ride motorcycles at incredibly unsafe velocities.
Oh, yeah.
I
I remember seeing
would
your motorcycles. Yeah.
I
Didn't one get burned up in a fire?
nope, that
You
probably
had a
was somebody else's. None of mine went down. I was very lucky.
I thought those. Yeah.
I had God watching out for me on every single one of those in ways that I just cannot. Like, I hit ice going into a dealer company, and I went into a field. The guy over there at the road helped help get me back up onto the road, and then off I went for PT.
Yeah.
I have narrowly avoided death at several times the posted speed limit, and I do mean narrowly, very very narrowly. Um,
Yeah.
Surfing, scuba diving, cliff jumping, uh, just not all that's bad, but just I really latch on to the kind of extreme hobbies, and
Yeah.
I sold the motorcycle and I got a boat, and I just would rather, because I can't take three kids and a wife out on the motorcycle at once, but I can take everybody out on the boat and we can have a good old time jumping
Yeah.
off rocks and towing them behind the boat and just living the
Well,
dream.
you let me know when I come get on your boat with you. I'll ride over there.
Absolutely, you are welcome anytime, my man. I'm learning how to fish. I should have learned to fish, but I just never did really in San Diego. I just be in the water surfing, and I don't surf as much anymore. Obviously, I do have a boogie board that I had my wife tow me behind the boat, and I had the boogie board, and it kind of worked, but it was. I don't think I'm going to do it again. But
Sounds awesome, dude.
it's a good time. I haven't been scuba diving out here, but just being finding more like pushing into my community, pushing into my family, pushing into for me going to church and just loving on folks has been how I've been able to reconnect with society. And yes, I run the tank page and I'm constantly involved in the community and I talk to folks at MCOE, I talk to folks at First Armor, to First Infantry, to First Cav, to whoever. But at the same time, like I've gotta unplug and just do me, right? Because getting around the community and just seeing all the awful things that I have to see, like I have to do something wholesome. Otherwise, I'm gonna go nuts. I've got to teach my kids. We homeschool our kids. They're on the other side of this curtain all day, and I love working remote. That's my vibe. I'm a good remote guy. Uh,
Good.
that's how I operate. I'm very well disciplined to get up and get into a meeting at 6 a.m. if I have to, and then just go tend to the garden for a couple hours, or
Yeah.
not a couple minutes, and then come back in, get onto another meeting, and I
Yeah.
love it.
I work part remote. It's kind of nice. Stay in your PJs all day.
That's it, man. That was
Yeah.
like making business decisions while wearing just pajamas is incredible because there's you'd be on a Zoom call with folks and I just turn the camera off and there's folks in the boardroom and I'm just like, all right,
Yeah.
so let's go over the metrics real quick. As a project manager, I'm just rolling through everything, rocking and rolling, and gathering up all the data and talking over the salient points. And but
Yeah.
yeah, it's
What
uh,
a what a life.
it's so
What a time
different.
to be alive.
It is,
Yeah.
dude. It is so different, from being in the tanks,
I
breaking
love
track
it.
in the motor pool, sweating and sucking, and going out there and bore sight and wait for the fog to lift.
And worry about if you're going to get killed, all the time. That's another thing I
Mhm.
let go of when I got out is you don't realize how tense you stay all the time because you're trained to watch out for people trying to kill you because you're a soldier, or hey, am I going to get deployed tomorrow and go get killed like all these other people I watched, right? Like I'm certainly in the job to do it, like letting go of all that. Like, oh my God, I can just be a fat slob if I want to.
And I just want to say, from not being you, I got to watch you work in your element, and you were a good soldier. I mean, you were a good armor leader. And I have seen
I
a
appreciate that, man.
lot of leaders. I've seen a lot of officers. I was only in for 8 years. There's guys that have been in for 30 years, but in that 8 years, you get a good palette of good, poor, and indifferent leadership. And I was able to. I mean, one of my favorite stories is you took us, the entire company, out to Kennesaw Mountain, Georgia, for the
Yeah.
what they call the
The
battle
battle
staff run.
staff ride.
Like
Yeah. I
nobody
I
does that.
fought really hard for that. No, I fought so hard to do that. And they don't do it at the company level at ForceCom like that with soldiers. You'll get battalion, staff rides and stuff. So to pull that together, and I really accredit that to the junior lieutenants that were there that I really kind of tasked out to like get the buses and the food and the logistics and the historian and everybody else. Dude, we had the historian,
That
the
was
guy that's on the
really
History
cool.
Channel, go
That
with us
was
down there, man. That was so cool, man. What a day.
that
And I
was
appreciate that, and I can tell you every mistake I made in command, man. I really, that was hard. Good God. That's the hardest job I've ever had in my life was working there at 269 at that time. And I made a lot of mistakes, and for years getting out, I really beat myself up for a lot of mistakes. And there's some mistakes I really still do beat myself up, I certainly broke a few eggs along the way, but I did try.
you definitely succeeded, and there's a lot of good leadership seeds that were planted for a lot of guys there. Um, I have so many different anecdotes of times where you just had made decisions that really kind of stuck out to me that were they really helped people. Like one of the guys fell asleep on guard duty, I remember I had just bedded down. I was so damn tired from sitting in the talk and running around in the heat all day doing supply stuff, and I had just bedded down. I had handed off the radio watch to one of the line guys from First Platoon, and I just hear dealer X-ray red one and dealer X-ray red one, and I get up. I'm like, oh, what is it? This kid is passed out in my lawn chair, and I think that was when red one had on flat ground ripped off both sides of his side skirts, and he was calling up to get help. I believe that was that call, and this kid was
I remember
completely
that.
passed out. And
Yeah.
man,
He
that
threw
was a
track and he tore that number one. Like, remember they had us like put a tarp over it because they're like, it's secret
yeah.
material inside. I'm like, actually, they declassified that like a year ago.
It that was a hell of a thing. But that kid got a rude awakening for falling asleep on guard duty. I remember that. That was that was funny. And then just overall, you had some tough soldiers to deal with who were dealing with a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And you got to see that firsthand, and that was not easy. As a company commander dealing with some folks who were dealing with some complex trauma, and then trying to process that yourself. And to your credit, I mean
Yeah.
that was something. So yeah, you've done some incredible things since you have been out of the army. What is some advice for folks who maybe are looking to make a change, or maybe, I mean, would you, if you look at it, knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
Yeah, I would, and I would do it better, right? Knowing what I know now, I would live a healthier life, and I think, again, going back to kind of a toxic family and stuff, I was never really had good guides in life, and so I had to kind of figure that out myself. And I kind of fell down in that path a little bit, like I said. When I started actually feeling like I was living my life is when I started living for myself. And I realized I've got to take care of myself. Nobody's going to take care of me. Right. Everybody's like those infantry guys we were talking about earlier. They hate everybody, right? They're not
Yeah.
gonna like you got to take care of yourself, man. And that's just the world. I don't care if it's the army or corporate America or your own neighborhood. Like everybody's kind of out for themselves, right? Like there's some social people out there, but like we all got our own problems and we all got our own lights to keep on. And we all got our own healing to do. And the people that I see are really hurting aren't taking care of themselves, and I don't want to sound like you keep bringing it up. People get so sensitive when you talk about it, but it's alcohol. The number one problem I see with people that are really hurting is that they're over consuming alcohol,
It's the
right?
most destructive
They're
thing I've ever seen.
yeah, it is, and they're over consuming it. They're binging on it. They're drinking every single day. They're living that lifestyle to where they're going to bars, clubs, whatever. It's constantly drinking, and their health is going down. They're getting depressed. They're hungover all the time, right? Like it's just they're starting to look the part, and they're not taking care of themselves. You got to take care of yourselves. And again, I'm not saying anything wrong with drinking. People can do it, but over consuming is definitely a problem. You
Dangerous.
got to take care of yourself, and you got to take care of your health too. And there's so many people that don't take care of their health, and it just drives me nuts. You see these veterans, and again, I do a lot of hiring, a lot of recruiting. I talk to a lot of veterans. I'm part of the veteran committee of my organization that I work in. But you see these guys, they're just like, oh man, I ran in the army. I ain't running no more. I'm like, bro, you were in the army for like 3 years, 20 years ago, right? Like you got a long life ahead of you. Take care of yourself. What does running a couple times in the army got to do with you, like not dying of a heart attack right now? You know what I mean? Like, so you see that, you can't make those excuses. People make a lot of excuses as to why they do things, and if they're making excuses, they know it's a problem, right? But they don't address it. You got to tackle that stuff head on. You can't hide really from anything. You got to be upfront and honest with yourself about who you are, where you're at, and where you want to go. Otherwise, you're just going in circles. And I see guys do it all the time. Like I said, I started living for myself. I realized, man, I'm depressed, and I'm not living this good lifestyle. There's things I want to do in my life that I'm not doing. I'm like, what do I want to be and where do I want to be and how do I get there and where do I start? And it can be overwhelming, right? You got to take it in bites. Over the past several years, like I said, I stopped drinking. A year after that, I stopped dipping. I used to dip all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
dipped like 3 cans a day. My whole time in command, I had to dip the whole time, right? That sucked quitting, but I did. I quit doing that. I quit. Like I'm really big on not taking pharmaceutical meds, right? Like
Me too.
I got to take my acid reflux medicine every single morning. But that's the only pill I really take. I mean, a little ibuprofen here and there if I need to. But I will tell you this too. I work out a lot because I realize that my health is important. I spend a lot of time not being able to move, right? And I don't ever want to be like that again. And I watch my parents who were alcoholic addicts get really big and unhealthy and die very young. And I don't want to die young. All my family's dead now. And my kids don't have grandparents on my side. And I'm like, dude, if I live that lifestyle, I'll be dead next. Right. And I don't want to be that way. I want to be there for my kids. But yeah, when I quit drinking too, like you talk about prescription meds, I used to be sore all the time. I was always having to take ibuprofen, because I would work out, for like 2 hours a day. And then I would go like get drunk at night because I travel 80% for work. So I'm always in hotels. But hey, when I quit drinking, I stopped getting sore. Like I probably take ibuprofen once a year now, So you just got to really live healthy. And, I watch people do it all the time. There were a lot of really brilliant guys in the army that lived very healthy. And I wonder now, because I was very miserable in the army and I also hurt a lot. But again, I way over consumed alcohol and I hadn't addressed any of my toxic, dad issues, family issues, PTSD issues. And I wonder, had I been living a little bit clearer, cleaner lifestyle back then, um, you know, would the outcome be different? I don't know,
That's
but I'm kind of happy where I'm at right now. I feel healthy right now. You know, I'm
that's good.
I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed to be where I'm at. I've lost a lot. There's a lot more there I've lost, but I'm in an acceptance mode. To where I'm like, if I want something, I'm the one that's going to have to get it. So ain't no time to slack.
I heard
I
that.
got
I
two
love it.
kids, like you said, man.
Yeah, living for the kids and just trying to be a good dad, trying to be a good role model. I'm not perfect, I sometimes I read situations wrong, but just being present. Sometimes just being present and being somebody to listen to or somebody to talk to, it can be enough. Just to
Your
know
kids
that they're
don't know
there.
that they don't know you're flawed as long as you're present and don't beat them, like
Yeah,
hell, even if you beat them, they love you, hell, I loved my dad for a long time. And I'm like, God, he didn't deserve a moment of my time.
I just
At
want to
43
be.
years old, I wish I could punch him in his face.
Sheesh. I lost both my parents in the last 2 years to lung cancer, and that's been I lost my
Sorry,
mom
brother.
on November 1st, and her and I were very close, very very
Yeah.
close, and that I went real hard. I have been really
Yeah.
difficult. I put myself. I've had to go see the doctor. I've had to get all kinds of stuff done because I treated my body like shit. But definitely dealing with it better. And I'm so thankful to have a support system, so a support network of folks who listen, folks who care, because I care. We're all connected to this thing, and being able to reach out and talk to folks is so important. You can't just sit there in your head and drive yourself nuts. If you're dealing with something, you got to reach out. You got to reach out and get some
Got to.
help and take care of
Yeah.
yourself. Just as you're saying, you got to take care of yourself. Just living in the negativity and just drinking yourself to death or whatever it is that you're doing, the negativity, there's always a way forward. There's always the
Yeah.
next ridge line or objective to take. Break everything down to phase lines if you have to freaking
Yeah.
take the next phase line, take the next objective to see where do you want to see yourself? What do you envision for your life and how do you make it happen? But Josh, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been great to hear your story and so many different things, brother. And I'm so glad to know you and call you a friend. You just, man, it's great to see you out there getting after it, man.
Love you too, brother, man. I appreciate being on. I really have. It's been therapeutic and good to sit here and talk about some of this stuff.
Absolutely, man.